Now we can actually see what we look like.
Oh, neat. That's cool.
Yes, I'm going to turn it just a bit so that you see a little more. There. That can all be edited out. And I'm going to put it on YouTube as well.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is good where I'm sitting?
It's perfect.
Okay. Right in the middle.
Right there. Okay. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Okay.
My guest today is someone I've been wanting to have a conversation with for a very long time. And quite honestly, I didn't know why. She just kept popping up at events that I was at. I would hear her name. I would hear about her. And I kept coming across her posts on Instagram, and they would stop me in my tracks. And then people kept telling me that she is someone that I need to meet and interview. It was like the universe kept presenting her to me over and over, and now I understand why. Her story is powerful and painful and complicated. It's also rich with empowerment, it's inspiring, and it's healing. Her name is Ashley Mielke, and honestly, I need to read part of her bio because it is so beautifully written. She says, and I quote, her professional titles are Registered Psychologist, Advanced Certified Grief Recovery Specialist, and founder and director of the Grief and Trauma Healing Center. She, however, prefers people lover and connection builder, which I love. She describes herself as a heart-centered, purpose-driven entrepreneur who is incredibly passionate about service and community. Her leadership is driven by the underlying philosophy that humanness is the common thread that connects each and every one of us, and that connection is the pathway to a rich, meaningful, and successful life and business. Are you hooked yet? Because I am as I read this. She's also the founder and director of People at the Grief and Trauma Healing Center and an advanced certified grief recovery specialist and the Grief Recovery Method certification trainer for Canada. She says she was called to her purpose in the wake of a number of painful losses, including her father's relapse into alcohol and drug addiction and eventual suicide. The experience led to her darkest, loneliest, and most excruciating periods of her life. But through it all, she uncovered a desire to serve others. She started her company at the tender age of 26, just 3 years after her dad passed, specializing in the program that changed her life and then helped heal her heart. That's the grief recovery method, which we will talk about later. She led a team of psychologists and therapists, and collectively, they have supported, you ready for this? Over 3,000 people through the exact program. It's an extraordinary story. And joining me to tell it all, I'm so thrilled to welcome to the inner circle, Ashley Mielke. What a pleasure to finally have you at my table.
Wow. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, Carrie. It's such a privilege to be here.
Listen, I am so honored to have you here, and you deserve every last bit of it for all that you have accomplished. And how interesting and, shall I say, ironic that we are taping this conversation on such an important day in your life today. Tell me why today holds such significance for you.
Yeah. So today is the 9-year anniversary since my dad's death. And it's interesting because there's been several important pivotal moments in my life that have also happened on this very day, including the day I became certified as a grief recovery specialist.
Like so many reasons. There's the universe providing again.
Absolutely.
And we are going to dig into your dad's life and the significance it has in your life and, of course, his death. But I'm going to hit the pause button right there. And I want to go back first because we got to build towards this and tell the story leading up to it. So I want you to go back to when you were a little girl because you found your purpose early on in life through a very, very tough childhood. Tell me about it.
So I remember my life being different than my peers by 5 years old. So one of my earliest memories was my dad being drunk and fighting with his family.
You remember this at 5 years old?
I do. And I remember feeling confused and not really sure what was going on. And it wasn't until I was much older when I could put it all together. But several experiences with him drinking, and just a sense of loneliness growing up. Like already at 5, on the playground, struggling to make connections with other kids. And I think it's because I just felt so different. Didn't know how to make those attachments.
Mm-hmm. So loneliness, can you define how you processed it back there? Was it being different? Are they one and the same? Because is that what started it all back there for you?
I think there was a desire to belong and to fit in, but I never really felt that. And that's an experience I carried for most of my life, until I began to heal and recover from my past,
right,
and started to tell my story openly. But that was a feeling, a longing to belong, ever since 5.
Okay, what was happening between your mom and dad at that time?
So I don't have a lot of memories of my parents together. I just know that they divorced when I was about 6 years old.
Okay.
So my mom and I moved out of our home. I started at a new school.
Pause. What do you remember about moving out of your home? That's big. You're in grade, what, 1?
Yes, so it was grade 1 going into grade 2. Honestly, I don't have a lot of recollection except that we moved into a new place. My dad wasn't there, and I eventually figured out that they weren't together when I went and visited my dad at his new apartment at 7.
Oh gosh, what was that like for you?
Well, I didn't know any different at the time.
Okay.
So it was, again, a sense of, okay, something feels different. It's not like my peers, but I couldn't really put words to it.
Okay. Were you close to both of them?
I guess as close as I could be.
Okay.
My parents were very young when they had me. They were 20 and 21 years old. And so now as I look back, I have the utmost compassion for both of them. I can't imagine what it was like for my mom.
Oh my gosh.
Being, 26 years old, 27 years old with a little girl to take care of. And then my dad was out partying, and he really put himself first. So there were many periods throughout my childhood that he wasn't present.
Describe what those were like when you would go visit your dad at his apartment. You must have been excited to see him when you finally got to go.
Yes. And there was a disconnect. Like, I could tell that he probably wasn't so interested in being a dad at that point in my life.
He was young.
He was young.
Yeah.
And had all his own stuff that he was dealing with. So it was often a sense of, how can I keep her occupied while she's in my care? Or he would go out, or just bring me with him.
Bring you with him where?
Well, there's some occasions where he would go out to the bar and leave me in the car to sleep while he would go out.
Ashley, how old were you? You were 7 at this time
I was
doing that?
About 10. Or he would, there's one memory around that same time where he took me to a crack house where he used drugs, and I was with him.
What are your memories like from that experience? Do you have clear, vivid memories? What do you remember about it?
I remember not feeling safe, and it being a very dirty environment. It was a apartment downtown Edmonton with no furniture except a mattress on the floor, and I remember a condom wrapper sitting on the floor, and then a person sitting on the floor as well. So I just sat against the wall and waited for my dad to be finished in the bathroom.
So he went into the bathroom, took cocaine.
I'm not really sure what he was using at that time. My dad used a lot of different drugs, and then we left. And yeah, I don't think he thought twice about, driving a vehicle, bringing me, and being under the influence.
So he would get in his vehicle with you in it. And what would he say to you? How would he describe what he was doing? Or would he talk to you?
He would say, we need to go visit a friend. Or if he would go and pick up drugs, he would say, I need to go meet my friends and pick something up. And that was the language he used, and I just didn't know.
Did you ask questions?
Never.
Why not?
I don't know. I guess I just learned to be silent, and I trusted him. He was my dad.
Were you afraid?
I definitely felt unsafe, but again, being so young, I wasn't able to put words to it.
Okay. And then what about, you said the times he would leave you in the car and go into the bar?
Yes.
For like how long, and what did you do?
I would sleep. I remember feeling really cold and tired, and I would just sleep. And
Would he give you blankets or what?
no, I would just recline the passenger chair.
So heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Okay. And for how many hours would you?
I don't know. I can't really put time to it. I just remember it being late and being tired and trying to sleep. And then we would drive, and he would roll the windows down, and we would be like cruising. And I just remember it being late, dark, and feeling really tired and confused.
Oh, you must have been.
Yeah.
And when he would get into the vehicle, again, would he say anything to you?
No, there was
Nothing.
no ever any conversation about anything that happened.
Would you hug him and say like anything to him when he get back in the vehicle after being alone for that amount? I mean, I guess, why didn't you get out of the vehicle and go ask for help?
I think it maybe goes back to that first time at 7 when he left me for the first time, and he said, "Don't answer the door, don't answer the phone, just sit here, I'll be right back." And so I listened, like he was this important authority source in my life, and I think I just obeyed and was just, a very submissive child and never questioned him.
That's extraordinary amount of time to be alone by yourself. Okay, how did you explain this to your mother?
I didn't.
What do you mean you didn't?
So I never did talk to my mom about
What?
any of these experiences.
You never told her this was going on?
Never.
Because?
Again, it was so sort of normal for me. I just never questioned it. Like, it didn't feel right, but I never did bring it to my mom. And even as time went on and I was a teenager and had a greater understanding of what was going on, I still never told her. And that was because I was so afraid that if she knew, I wouldn't be allowed to see him anymore.
Oh, boy. So you really were protecting him in so many ways.
Absolutely. He was my dad. I loved him. I looked up to him. And the insignificant amount of time that I did get to see him, I wanted to embrace that time.
I don't want to ask this question to make it sound like I'm asking you to choose, but did you have a closer relationship with your mom or your dad, or were they equal?
They were different.
Different
They
how?
were different. So my mom was the rock. She was the stable, secure parent who offered me stability.
Mm-hmm.
And she took care of me, and she made incredible sacrifices for me as a young mom, going back to school and educating herself. And she did such a beautiful job with the tools she had,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm so grateful for, and a really great work ethic. And she did her best. And then I had my dad, who was sort of this, unstable parent in my life, but he was very emotionally available and responsive to my needs. So it was interesting that they both offered me such unique gifts in our relationships. And my dad was my emotional rock.
How though? Because you didn't talk to him.
So this came much later
Okay.
in life, when we began to establish more of an emotional connection. So I was no longer a little girl who he had to take care of. And he got really excited about our relationship. So that was about 12-ish and
Okay.
on. And he was just, him and I were so alike. We were like the same person, just very heart-centered, very emotionally oriented. We could talk about anything and everything. And I felt very safe emotionally with him,
Okay.
which I know confuses a lot of people. They're like,
Yes.
how is that possible?
Mhm.
But
When in many ways people listening to this could be, but he abandoned you and put you in such dangerous situations so many times. Why did you not feel resentment to him? Or is this the older Ashley looking back on life now with love and healing?
probably both.
Mm-hmm.
I think absolutely there was a lot of pain and resentment and hurt and disappointment in that relationship. And it caused a lot of heartache throughout my life,
Right.
in relationships. But with the healing journey, now I can look back and see him with
And we're going to go
compassion.
down that healing journey for sure. But until we do, I want you to take me to what life was like when you were a teenager. Was he still drinking heavily?
Yes, that was the worst time of my life
Because
I was highly aware of his addiction and was living in incredible fear that he was going to die. So just pure fear when I thought about my dad. And his way of loving me, as he told me later, was to push me away, right? So he would be using, and then he would disappear out of my life for months, sometimes 6 months, and I wouldn't know if he was dead or alive. And I would be communicating with his girlfriend at the time and be like, so have you heard from him? Is he okay? What's happening? And just very much became that parentified child with him, worrying about him, and just dreading the worst nightmare, which would be his death. So my life became a facade in high school.
did your friends see it?
Very few knew the truth about what was going on with him. But for the most part, I kept that very private.
Okay. Was there ever a situation that he put you in, like that continued on, that was dangerous? I mean, leaving you alone is one thing, but throughout the years, I mean, was he always driving?
Well, there's one memory that I have at 14 years old. So I was in grade 9. I was with my best friend, and he drove to a liquor store. And so already I had the pit in my stomach of like, oh no, this is not good. He got a 2.6 of vodka, came out to the car and told me I was driving. And he laid down, if you can imagine it, he laid down in the back seat and started to guzzle this 2.6. And now I was so I was so embarrassed and ashamed, and didn't know what to do. But of course I listened, and so I drove us home. I didn't know where to go.
How did you even know how to drive a vehicle?
No idea. I think it was just that survival mode kicked in, and I knew I needed to get us home. But then I basically dropped myself off, and then he got in the car. I didn't know what to do. I was so afraid. He got in the vehicle and drove my friend home. And he was already stumbling drunk. So I sobbed when they drove away. And all I could think of and prayed was, please, God, do not let them die in a car accident. And that was one really traumatic experience that I had as a teen.
How long did this continue, and tell us about the day where it all changed.
So my dad actually got sober at the end of my grade 12 year. So he had hit his rock bottom once again and made the choice to clean his life up. So he got back into recovery, AA and NA. He started to rebuild his life, and he actually created what we would see as a really beautiful, healthy life. He was a sought-after crane operator in Alberta, like top of his trade. He had an amazing job. He had a house again. He had vehicles. He was taking vacations, like what we would think is a really normal, healthy life.
It must have been exciting for you too.
It was such a relief. It was the first time in my life where I didn't have to worry about him.
Oh.
So we developed a really beautiful relationship. Then he went on vacation in 2009 and relapsed. He told me he made the decision before he left on his trip that he was going to have a drink when he arrived. And then that just led to a path of self-destruction. So that was in 2009. And that year, like 2009 to mid-2010, was just a year from hell. So he had a suicide attempt in there. On the wagon, off the wagon. I went to family therapy with him to try to get him help. I went to AA and NA meetings with him. I wrote him letters. I sat on his bedside begging him to get help.
What were you doing in your life at this time?
I was a graduate student at the time doing my master's degree.
I can't imagine trying to wrap your head around all of this. Like, you're busy and you're living your own life, but it's like half of your life is dedicated, if not more, to your dad, helping him
Yes.
live his.
Yes, so a lot of fear. Like I remember being at school and just being so preoccupied with him. And again, is he dead? Is he alive? How long has he been sober? So the last time I seen him was, we went out for dinner for his 45th birthday. That was September 2010. And after we went for dinner, we went to an AA meeting. And that was my idea. And in that meeting, when he introduced himself, he said he was sober for 3 days. And he ended up texting and being on his phone the whole time. So I started to bawl and sob during this meeting. And at the time, I wasn't sure why I was so emotional. But I think it was then I knew that I had lost him and that I had done everything within my power to save him, essentially. And so I made a decision after that day that I would no longer have him in my life unless he chose sobriety.
Oh, that's tough.
It was the hardest decision I ever had to make. And it was 2 months later when, after coming home from an alcohol and cocaine bender, when he took a razor blade in the shower and cut a major artery in his arm and essentially bled to death.
And you got the phone call.
I got the phone call from his fiance that morning, and I knew why she was calling. I just felt it in my gut. And she said, he's on the floor, the paramedics are working on him, but it doesn't look good. And I just knew then.
How did you process this? So did you go to the hospital, what?
So I said, well, what are you doing? She said, they're going to take him to the hospital. So I picked up my mom on the way.
So they still had a good relationship during this all?
They did have a good relationship. They were able to establish that over the years.
Wow.
Yes. So, and my dad was such a huge part of her life too. I mean, they were essentially dating since they were young teenagers themselves. So I picked her up, we went to the hospital and went into the family room, and that's where they told me. His fiance said to me, I'm so sorry, Ashley, he didn't make it.
That was 9 years ago today?
9 years ago today.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
How can you tell us what that was like to have to go through that at such a young age? When you fought for him for so many years, it's almost like you lived like so much of that with him.
Yeah, I did. So many feelings, so many emotions, anger and hurt and disappointment and devastation and sadness and fear. He was my emotional rock. And all I needed was him. I had nobody to turn to.
You weren't close to your mom?
Yes, but he was the person who I went to for everything in my life.
He was your person.
He was my person. So all I needed was him, and now he was dead. And I remember standing at the foot of his bed with just this visceral fear of, how am I going to survive this? How am I going to, how do I move forward from this? Just incredible fear and shame. Shame at how he decided to die, and the thought that I wasn't enough for him.
Okay, explain the shame. I don't understand that part of it. Shame because of judgment from others?
I was so afraid that people would judge not only him, but me. I thought, what are people going to think of me when they find out how he died, if they know the truth about his story and what he went through?
So, how did you process this and start to put one foot in front of the other again?
So I did what I was very good at doing, which was avoiding and distracting. And being a grad student, I was very busy. So that became my distraction. I just literally threw myself back into school and work.
This is grad student majoring in psychology, right?
Yes.
Was that helping you process this?
That's a really good question. because ironically, I was surrounded by psychologists. I was doing my clinical placement in a private practice, and my supervisor was a PhD psychologist. And the first thing this person said to me, the day my dad died, my heart is shattered into a million pieces. He said, well, this will just make you a better therapist.
Oh God. Like, no words. And what was your reaction to that?
Okay. And it was, you need to keep busy and you need to get back to school.
Is it wrong that I feel angry by that? I get
No.
angry hearing that. Like, I mean, I can't help it. Maybe because times have changed so much with vulnerability and being able to share those. But that was a reaction?
That was the reaction. And nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew how to talk to me. So I became very isolated, which was already how I felt.
Exactly.
And I just thought that's what I needed to do. That's what these people are telling me to do. There's a lot of messages I received around, okay, you have to be strong and you've got to keep busy and give it time. So I just trusted that this was the right information to heal and move forward.
When did you stop trusting and find your own path and decide there's a better way?
So over the next few years, I realized that this keeping busy and avoiding and distracting and workaholism wasn't working, because anytime I was reminded of my dad, anytime I heard the word suicide, or someone was talking about, parental death, I would have panic attacks. I would have to run away and bury myself. And I talked about my dad like he was still alive when people would ask about him.
Is that because you never gave yourself permission to grieve?
Absolutely. I didn't know. I didn't know how to. I didn't know how to process my feelings. I didn't know who to talk to. Anybody I did talk to just said all these intellectual things that just were really hurtful and didn't sit well. So I had a lot of loss of trust in the relationships around me, and I thought I just had to keep it to myself, keep busy, and enough time would pass and everything would be fine. And I discovered that wasn't accurate. So then, come 2013, I went on my own journey to find a program that might change my life, and organically, the grieving people I began to work with in private practice.
Oh, I can't wait to dig into this. Tell me about this, because I alluded to the program at the start of our conversation. Tell me about it.
So sort of how it went was, I was aware that I wasn't really dealing with my grief, and it was really easy for me to focus on my clients and who I was serving, because that's what we're good at, right? I can take care of you, and then I don't have to take care of me. So I was working with grieving people and realized I have so much compassion for them, but I don't know how to help them. They keep coming back, and I hold space, and we share their story, but I don't know how to help them heal their broken heart. So then I went to our friend Google and started to type in like grief programs, grief trainings, and I came across the Grief Recovery Institute. And I began to read their blogs, and I downloaded their ebook, and I just fell in love with their philosophy and their approach to helping grieving people. And so I signed up for their certification training.
The Grief Recovery Institute, where is it based out of?
They are in Bend, Oregon. They're originally in California, and they're an institute that's been around for about 45 years now.
Wow. Thank God I'm normal. Because you telling that story, through the death of my parents, I did that often. I didn't ever come across the Grief Recovery. I probably would have found you first, but thank you for your vulnerability telling that story, because I think so many people are going to be able to relate, because we often turn to Dr. Google when we don't want to talk to anyone else about it. We don't want to admit we're struggling, and we don't want to admit we don't know what we're going through.
Absolutely.
And how to fix it.
Yes, and how do I help these heartbroken people that are in my office when I haven't even
dealt with it yourself?
Dealt with my own pain. So signed up for the certification training, was so excited, had no idea how this was going to impact my life. I just knew I wanted to help people. So I went through the training and
you went down to Oregon?
It was actually here, the Edmonton training. And John James, the founder of the program, was the trainer that weekend.
Oh my gosh, meant to be.
Yes, so it was a beautiful experience. And when I walked in, I had no idea that over the next 4 days, I was actually going to be walking through the program myself.
Okay.
So I'm like, I'm not here for me. I'm here for my clients.
Right.
And yeah, I had just the most incredible transformative experience going through the program, learning how to, what we call emotionally complete my relationship with my dad, and seeing the value of walking through the very program that I was now going to deliver to my clients.
Wow. Okay. You threw down a big term. You said how you will emotionally complete your relationship with your dad. Yeah. What does that mean?
So how we define incompleteness is an accumulation of all of the undelivered emotional communications in our relationships with our loved ones when they die. So that is things like all the things we wish had been better or different or more, and all of the hopes, dreams, and expectations that we're robbed of when they die or any other circumstance. So I was able to take several small and big actions to discover what was incomplete and unfinished in my relationship with him, and then to be able to take the action of completion in the safety of that group.
You came out of that training a changed person?
I was a changed person, and by day 2 of the training, I had no idea what this program was. I hadn't read the book. The trainer, the founder of the Grief Recovery Institute said...
John James?
John James.
Okay.
He said, you know, there's something really special about you, Ashley, and I want you to be our trainer for Canada.
Oh my, like, what?
Yes.
How did you react to that?
I was like, okay. We hadn't even completed the program, but I was like, I am so in love with what we're teaching and what we're doing. Yes. What do I need to do?
So what did you do?
He said, upon completion, he said, I want you to go out and complete as many one-on-one programs as you can. I need you to go and help as many grieving people as you can. And in 6 months, we're going to fly you out to Oregon, and we're going to put you through another training, and then we're going to send you to Los Angeles and put you in another training. And there were 4 trainings that I attended, and then that was it. A year later, almost to the day of my certification, I facilitated my first certification training.
Oh my gosh. What did that feel like for you?
It was incredible. I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be, that I had found my calling and my purpose. And by that time, also the big thing was after the day I was certified, I then started my business as well, the Grief and Trauma Healing Center.
Before we get into your business, is there a couple of takeaways for people who are listening right now, that a couple of tangible takeaways that you can share with them that you learned that was really powerful, that we can just plant some seeds there if they're listening and they're grieving or they're in pain?
Yes. Oh my gosh, there's so many things. Mm-hmm. It's so important that we debunk the misinformation when it comes to grief. There's a lot of myths out there. Like, you know, don't feel bad. Like, it's not okay to have sad feelings. To replace the loss, that somehow our relationships are replaceable or interchangeable. That we have to grieve alone. That it's an experience we're not allowed to share with others. That we have to keep busy as a way to move through.
Yeah.
And the big one, you know, time heals all wounds.
Oh, I laugh and I almost cry at the same time, because I told you before we started this, I lost both my mom and dad in the span of 4 years, and all of those things I went through, all of them, until I gave myself permission to grieve. But I still have a lot of work to do, so I'm learning as you're talking.
Yeah.
But that's like debunking those myths. Wow, that's powerful.
Yes. And just like anything else in life, we have to take action to heal our heart. We can't just wait for time to pass or keep busy enough and hope it goes away. We have to take action like we would if we fell down and broke our leg.
So by taking action means seeking help?
Seeking help, yes, absolutely. Like, there's so many beautiful things we can do, and one of them is, you know, the grief recovery method that actually provides an action program on how to complete our relationships that have ended or changed. And I mean, it's completely transformed my life and millions of people around the world.
Oh my gosh. Okay, tell me about the business. It's the name again?
The Grief and Trauma Healing Center.
Okay, so a year after being certified, you're the trainer for Canada, you decide to launch your own business.
It was the day after my certification training.
And you were, what, 26?
I was 26.
Ashley.
I had no idea what I was doing or how I had no idea. I just knew, okay, I have been called to serve grieving people. Here is a program that has changed my life. I don't know what I'm doing, but that's okay. God will show the way. So I had leased, a tiny little office space downtown, put up my little website, and started, I think, advertising on like just my Facebook page and just grieving, and then just sort of organically growing from that point.
What was response like?
It was incredible. It was incredible. And it was like this ripple effect that, I was seeing someone and then they went and told, all their family members and friends. And so everyone just started coming until it was like, okay, well, I guess it's time to grow. Like people are like, so what's your business plan? I'm like, don't have one.
I laugh because I always talk about in entrepreneurship that once you're 60% there, you're ready to launch. Were you even 60% there?
No. I hadn't even facilitated the program myself yet, but I was like, I don't care.
Love it.
I believe in this so much that I know it's going to change lives.
And is that the difference? Because you believed in it.
Absolutely. And I seen what it did for me. And that was enough for me to trust it, to serve other people.
Okay, so you started off all by yourself, and then it was like you started to hire?
Yes. So it was about a year later that I hired my first contractor, another psychologist, and then we just grew from there.
Did you train that person?
Yes.
Okay, so everybody you hired, you trained as well?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And how did they react to the program?
Everybody just absolutely falls in love with it. And the most common thing I hear is that is the missing piece.
In recovery from grief.
Yes.
That program.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're all trained clinicians, but there's that one piece around like that the emotional incompleteness in our relationships that we don't tap into. We just almost like everything's so intellectual and high level that it moves us into our heart. It moves us into this part of us we don't spend enough time really diving into, and that's the experience. And so I love training psychologists because it's incredible how it blows their mind, and then we get to take that back to our clients and then witness the transformation over and over and over.
That's what I was going to ask you about, is the transformation that you see, or some of the feedback you've been given. And without, of course, you can't reveal client names, but can you share a story or something that you heard that you'll never forget from someone that really impacted you?
Oh my gosh, there's so many.
So when you say so many, like to date, how many patients have you treated?
So collectively over 3,000.
Over how many years?
Oh, over the 6 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Wow. And you have how many psychologists working for you in this program?
So we are a team of 10, and we are continuing to grow.
That is so exciting. Like, what a massive accomplishments. Okay, but pause. Go back to the story.
Yes.
I digressed.
So there's so many stories that I could tell you, but there's one recent, this beautiful woman. Oh my gosh. She came from a horrendous childhood, sexual abuse by multiple people, lots of trauma, neglect, and she had spent on and off 20 years in Alberta hospital for suicide attempts and mental health issues and all of these diagnoses. When she completed the program with me, and this was just completing one relationship in her life, she said, what we have accomplished in 7 sessions is more healing and recovery in this short amount of time than I have accomplished in 10 years working with my psychiatrist.
Wow.
And the gratitude that our clients feel when they say, you saved my life, this saved my life, and to watch them flourish after loss is like, that is the most incredible gift. That's why I keep showing up and doing this work.
I have to ask this question, and it's with all due respect, but you know, you work in this and you've lived it. Do you ever feel like that you're sitting in it too much? You know, like when you've lived something and you're constantly dealing with grief and heartbreak and loss, does that impact you? Do you take that home at night? Or does healing them also help in your healing journey? You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, because a lot of people assume that, wow, this must be such dark, painful work that you do every day. And the truth is, if you were to walk into our office, it is the most energetic, enthusiastic, hopeful place. And because we are walking our clients through an action-oriented journey, we don't feel stuck. So we don't feel like, oh, we're just spinning our wheels. We don't know how to help these people. We're actually seeing people transform. Now, the most challenging losses for me to process is when we're working with mothers whose babies have died or young children have died. And that's really close to heart, being a mom myself, where I do sometimes take those losses home, because I look at my son and my heart breaks for these families.
How can it not?
Yeah.
So you've been trained in this. You've now trained a team of psychologists, but what your patients go through is a very specific, you said, action-oriented program.
Yes.
With massive results at the end.
Yes.
Massive success for you. But you haven't stopped there.
No.
Tell me where you're now moving into, and you're new. It's not so new anymore, because now you're taking this into business in a whole new way.
Yeah.
Your conscious culture program, right?
Yes.
Did I get the name somewhat right?
You did.
Okay.
The signature program is called the Conscious Culture Boot Camp. And I'll take you back how this transition sort of happens. People say like, okay, why? Okay, you're super passionate about grief. Now you're moving into leadership and culture. How did that happen? But what I've discovered is there is that common thread that connects each and every one of us, right? From the therapy room to the boardroom. And I began to work with, again, organically, a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners and founders and executive directors. And they would come into my office and share the pain of their life. And then it would segue into the pain in their business, around relationships, around communication, around culture, and not having the tools on how to create that. So I essentially took this same approach to working with my clients, which was around creating a safe place for people to feel seen and heard and known, and connecting people to that common thread of humanness into the business world, and helping business owners and entrepreneurs create environments grounded in trust and psychological safety and belonging, all with that deep foundation that we're all human. We all want to feel seen and heard, and that's the most important tool that we can bring into our companies.
So is this a program that you designed, a specific program?
It is. I spent over 800 hours because, you know, I had nothing but time.
Yes.
This was getting up at 5 a.m., 7 days a week for about 6 months, every weekend, evenings, because I am so passionate about this conversation, this topic that is not talked about enough, and that is so important.
Why is this missing in this day and age? Like, why are we so disconnected? I think I might know the answer, but I'm not going to assume. I'm going to turn to you for the answer.
I think we're still driven by traditional business models.
Which are,
well, I don't know exactly what those are in terms of like what people are taught in business school. But I think just that idea that business is business.
Oh.
Right? Business is about profit, and business is about strategy, and business is about ROI, return on investment. Yes. So we fail to recognize that that business is more than just business. It's personal, and it's about relationships and people, and the very people that drive our companies forward. That what about them? Right? What about the environment we create for them to show up and to do their best work, which I am so proud to provide for our team at the Grief and Trauma Healing Center, a place where they can show up fully and put their best foot forward and not be afraid to speak up or ask for help or to be a human being. And then to see their productivity, to see how unbelievable they are because they feel safe and supported and loved.
Ashley, how long is this program? Like, how many hours, or is it a week? Or tell me about it. Like, if a company engages with you, what can we expect?
It's a 2-day boot camp, and it's jam-packed. It really could be spread over several days. And I also include a 30-day email communication as a lead-up and preparation, and then 30-day post-training as well to help with the implementation and support in integrating that.
My head's spinning right now. I can't even imagine how busy you must be, because you also have a little one. He's how old?
He'll be 3 next month.
Okay, and a husband?
And a husband.
I want to dig into that for a second, because, you know, there's maybe it's an old school of thought that they say a lot of little girls marry their dad. Did you marry your dad?
In most ways, yes, I did.
Is that a good thing?
The thing about my dad, if you take out the addiction, the alcohol and drug addiction, my dad was the most loving, compassionate, thoughtful, generous person. And my husband, in many ways, is that person. Very selfless, very giving, very loving, very affectionate. And there's actually a lot of things that my husband says and does that reminds me a lot of my dad, like almost like freakish, like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how my dad says that or does that. But I got the total package with my husband because he's also that secure base, that stability in my life. And he stays home with our son so I can do all the things that I'm doing.
That was my next question, is how do you balance and get it all in? Because you have a team of psychologists, a business, plus your boot camp. And have you trained anyone else in giving your boot camp, or is it just you?
It's just me.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm a one-woman show when it comes to the Ashley Mielke strategic consulting business. But my husband, he's the rock. So 2 years ago, we retired him from his 20-year career in the oil fields as a driller. And he was just so gracious, and he was willing